a start of much more. On va commencer. Quelques questions.
Start with a few questions.
We'll be ready to take questions.
Yep.
First question.
Pas de questions? No questions? Okay. No, just kidding.
Yes, please. The mic is over there.
There's the mic over there.
First
Sorry.
question. Première question.
Anis Hidari, CBC. Prime Minister, are you willing to approve a pipeline even if British Columbia or affected First Nations don't agree? Would you compensate them instead?
Well, just to be clear, this agreement today between Alberta and the Government of Canada, it's the first step. It's an example of cooperative federalism. It's we're agreeing in partnership and in a spirit of trust. But what has to happen, several things have to happen before a pipeline is built. And one of those is a private sector proponent. Secondly, it goes directly to your question, which is that there needs to be full partnership, including equity ownership, substantial economic benefits with First Nations in Alberta, First Nations in British Columbia, as well as agreement and substantial economic benefits for the people of British Columbia. So we look at this as the start of a process. We've created some of the necessary conditions for this to happen. But there's a lot more work to do, and very much in the spirit of partnership.
Et en français?
Et en français,
In French?
c'est un grand moment pour
This is a great moment for Alberta and Canada, but it's just the start of a process.
Qui ont besoin de beaucoup de choses. On
A
commence
process
avec
that needs many things.
un acteur dans le secteur privé, une proponent,
We are starting with a private sector proponent for the pipeline.
Et c'est fondamental.
And second, and this is fundamental,
avec des peuples autochtones.
we need partnerships with Indigenous peoples here in Alberta and in British Columbia.
Avec des bénéfices substantiels.
Partnerships with substantial benefits.
Et ça inclut des actions dans le projet.
And this includes shares in the projects and substantial benefits for British Columbia. As I mentioned, this is just the start of a process of engagement, of discussion, and of partnership.
What if there aren't any private sector proponents? You mentioned them there.
Well, if there's not a private sector proponent, there won't be a pipeline. I mean, and let me say another thing, if I could, just to take advantage of your question, which this agreement is about much more than just a pipeline. Pipeline's obviously an important component to this, and specifically as a priority of Pipeline to Asia. But it's also the Pathways Project, the world's largest carbon capture storage project, a project that will make Alberta energy, specifically oil and gas, competitive for the long term because it'll make it low carbon. A project that will create an entirely new industry, an industry that needs workers, like the workers here. It's also about nuclear, building nuclear capacity in Alberta, building interties, transmission interties. We need a lot of iron for transmission interties with British Columbia, with Saskatchewan. So we have a much more efficient and competitive and lower cost grid. And it's about building AI data centers that are sovereign, to use the word. So that means that we control in Canada our data, our information, our intelligence, if I can put it that way. So it's a very ambitious and comprehensive partnership, and there's many things that can be done going forward.
Et aussi en français.
Also in French?
S'il n'y a pas un acteur dans le secteur privé,
If there is no private sector proponent for the pipeline, there will be no pipeline. That's clear. It's not a question of federal government money, nor Alberta government money. But this MOU is bigger than just a pipeline. It includes carbon storage, the Pathways Project, and this is the largest carbon storage project in the world. And it will be a new industry for Alberta and for Canada. It includes nuclear energy. It includes connections between the electricity systems of BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and perhaps Yukon and Northwest Territories. It also includes data centers in artificial intelligence. There's a lot to do. And we will be needing a lot of specialized workers, just like those workers that are here.
I want to thank our viewers watching us on the main network in Quebec and Ontario. Our coverage continues right now on News Channel.
After signing the agreement, well, this MOU is the start of a process, as I said before. For example, when it comes to the environmental aspects, we will need to determine the process for the Pathways carbon storage project for clean energy. And at the core of this agreement is strengthening the tier systems. That's the industrial carbon pricing system. The province of Alberta is committed to removing the effective price in that tier system and setting it at $130. That is more than 6 times the price currently. So that's one example, but there are others. But it's a great example of how strengthening rules or systems can be effective when it comes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So it is a process that will be going on until the beginning of April. But is that enough? Because there's a threat that Stephen Guilbeault will leave cabinet if it's not enough? It's enough for the Canadian government. I'm the Prime Minister, and I need to make decisions in the interest of Alberta and of Canada. And in order to get results, real results in reduction of GHG emissions, this requires investments. Investments in Alberta, in BC, and large-scale investment across Canada. With this MOU, we are setting the conditions for major investments in carbon storage and connection with the electricity systems in nuclear energy. And all of that is necessary. It's necessary to bring investments in methane reductions here in Alberta, and all of that is required. We need that in order to bring down GHG emissions.
A warm welcome to all of our viewers watching us on our main network in Manitoba and Saskatchewan. You're looking live at the Prime Minister in Calgary, Alberta.
Finalized and made more specific over the course of the next several months by the start of April. But at its core is tightening the tier system, which is the industrial carbon price system here in Alberta, to a level of at least $130 with a pass price from there. What does that mean? It means more than a 6 times increase in the industrial price of carbon, from its effective level, which is much lower than the headline level, the effective level, to the level that's committed in the agreement. That's the first thing. The second is methane reductions in methane, more than 75% reductions in methane by 2035, that commitment that's there. Thirdly, it creates the conditions for this big investment in the Pathways project, the largest in the world, which will have huge reductions in emissions, the equivalent of taking more than 90% of the cars and trucks off the roads here in Alberta in the first phase of that project. It also creates the conditions for nuclear power and the conditions for interties between British Columbia, which is a clean grid, with Saskatchewan, with the Northwest Territories and Yukon, all to make it more efficient, more sustainable. We are going to get to our greenhouse gas objectives, our climate objectives, by only through massive investment. And so we need agreements like this in order to drive that massive investment. That's why this is that's one of the reasons why this is a good day for Alberta, a good day for Canada, and that's what the government of Canada is committed to doing. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Merci. Thank you.